Hey, it's election day here at the Studio C70 at the Committee of 70. I'm David Thornburg, President and CEO. All day today, we're going to be talking to different folks from around the city about this election, about the state of the city, trying to find interesting little stories about what's going on out there. And I'll tell you once and I'll tell you again, if you haven't voted already, now's the time to make a plan to get out to vote. Polls are open until 8 o'clock. So I am joined today as my first guest by Laura Boyce. Laura, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Laura comes to us as a Buchholz Fellow. She and 5 other folks between the age of 25 and 40 have joined the board of the Committee of 70 for this year and participated as full board members and also worked on some individual projects to help us further our mission. Buchholz Fellows are named after our great board member, Carl Buchholz, who passed away a couple of years ago. So this is a great opportunity to bring folks like Laura into the fold. So let's just start out. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, career so far, and what brought you to getting interested in this Buchholz Fellowship.
Sure. So I am an educator by trade. I started out after college teaching. My first teaching job was at West Philly High, and I taught high school social studies. So have always been interested in civic engagement and just the role of government in our lives. After teaching for 6 years in the city, I was a principal in Camden, New Jersey for 4 years. And I currently serve as the instructional practice director for an education nonprofit called Teach Plus that works to increase teacher voice in decision making, both policy and practice related, both here in Philadelphia and in 11 other states around the country. So that's my career. And I, when I applied for the Buchholz Fellowship, one of the things that I said was I am really particularly interested in civic engagement among young people. So the Buchholz Fellowship is all about engaging millennials and getting kind of our generation engaged. And I, as an educator, am also really interested in even younger than me, working with high school students and getting them engaged in the process and just building that habit of voting from very early on.
Yep.
Because I think it's really important.
Well, we're all singing the same song from the same hymn book.
Yeah.
And kudos to you for your career so far. I think I may have told you at one point I was a social studies teacher right out of college as well. So
it's a great job.
It is a great job. And one of the things that you mentioned, obviously we have a great interest in encouraging people to vote often. I can't say often on election day because, but. And to get educated, informed, and so forth. And I think what you mentioned is that process has to start early.
Absolutely.
There's nothing magic when you turn 18 that all of a sudden you go from disinterested to interested. So, and among other things, we always encourage people to, if you have young kids, to take them to the polls with you.
Absolutely.
That's one of my consistents. Did your parents take you to the polls?
Yeah, I very clearly remember going with my mom to vote.
Yeah, it feels kind of magical. It's
it
like,
does.
What the heck's going on here?
They get the stickers.
Absolutely. So, what strikes you, working with, first as a classroom teacher and a principal, now doing what you're doing, what kinds of things work to get younger folks, maybe 15, 16, 17, interested and engaged and curious about voting, elections, politics?
I think that there's a number of different things. A lot of times students are fairly engaged and know about kind of national politics that are going on and have a lot of thoughts and opinions about kind of some of the candidates. I remember when I was, my second year of teaching was when Barack Obama was running for president, and a lot of my high school students were really excited just about the historic nature of that election. I think getting students excited about local elections, the way to hook them in is really to get them thinking about issues that are important to them and to really understand how many of the issues that they care about, particularly things like schools, violence in their neighborhoods, those are going to be more affected by their local policymakers than by national politicians.
Yeah, we live in an interesting time where there is so much energy around national politics, particularly our current president.
Sure.
And yet we, I think like you, are really trying to figure out how to focus that energy on what happens locally, because you mentioned schools, parks, crime, streets, has a lot more to do with who serves in city council, mayor's office, the legislature, and so forth, and
Right.
what goes on in Washington. But and connecting the dots between sort of cause and effect is critical. So one of the things that you've been particularly engaged in the Buckholz Fellowship is you've taken sort of a leadership role with the Election Ambassadors program that we kicked off a few years ago. And so talk about that and your role in it and what you've been up to.
Sure. So the Election Ambassadors program is a program to engage high school students to get excited about voting and to participate in the voting process even before they can necessarily vote themselves, by going out to the polls on election day, serving as volunteers to answer questions for folks who are going to the polls, to observe to make sure there aren't violations at the polls, and often to administer a little questionnaire about issues that are important to voters. And so that's a program that's been going on for several years now, and was mostly headed up by Pat Christmas, kind of on an individual basis,
Right.
doing a lot of visits to high schools.
Very time intensive.
Very time intensive, very person intensive. So I've worked with Pat and Lauren to work from the original Election Ambassadors presentation that Pat put on himself to actually develop a 5-day curriculum that teachers can implement themselves, that not only prepares students to go out and be election ambassadors on election day, but also does a more general approach to why it's important to vote. And
Right.
so some of the things that we already talked about in terms of thinking about issues that are important in our communities, there's a lesson that's all about the importance of a single vote, where they look at some very close elections in recent Philadelphia history and think about how impactful one vote can be, particularly in some of these low turnout elections.
Yep.
Where they also take a look at local policymaking versus state and federal elections, and get to sort of learn about what types of decisions are made at the local level.
Sort of who does what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they get to explore our voter guide and take a look at who the candidates are in their particular neighborhoods and some of the positions that they take. So I, in my biased opinion, think it's a great little mini unit that teachers can utilize in order to help kids get excited about voting. One other thing that they look at in the curriculum is the process of getting registered to vote in Pennsylvania, and
Right.
they get the opportunity to, as a class, also make some recommendations about what would make it easier to vote in Pennsylvania, and are there any kind of policy reforms that they might suggest that would increase participation.
Yeah, we remind folks that we haven't changed the rules by which we vote essentially since 1937.
Right.
So I say tongue-in-cheek, fortunately nothing's changed since 1937. So, yeah, and you know, a few years ago, Governor Wolf's administration instituted online registration,
Right.
which is really a great leap forward. So it's as easy as it's ever been. It still could be easier.
Right.
It's as easy as it's ever been to register to vote.
The students do a little comparative analysis where they compare Pennsylvania to a few other states on measures such as how early before election day do you need to vote, do you need to be registered with a party in order to vote in the primary, and so forth, so that they can kind of decide for themselves what are there any of these policies that other states have that they might want to recommend for Pennsylvania.
So I know this is the first time out of the chute for this revised curriculum that you've done, but you got any early returns, any feedback? What seems to click and maybe what needs a little more refinement?
I would say we do not yet have that feedback, but we would welcome it from any
Yeah.
teachers who have implemented the curriculum this time, and I would love to continue to work to get it into the hands of more teachers for future elections.
Yeah. So just we'll sort of back up a sec. What's your observation? Again, you've been a teacher, principal, now sort of an advisor, a practice leader, if you will. What is it within the school building that builds and sustains a strong culture of engagement? Like what are the magic, is there a magic formula? Are there critical pieces that
In terms of civic engagement
Yeah.
specifically,
yeah,
I think right now,
or overall
Yeah.
culture? I mean,
I would say right now it is very dependent on a teacher in the building being really passionate about the work. And
Yeah.
I would love to see Philadelphia move towards kind of beefing up their civics curriculum and their kind of required coursework for around civics and the support that they give to social studies teachers. You know that in the era of post No Child Left Behind, the big focus is always going to be math and reading, and so social studies.
Testing, 1, 2.
While we have some great curriculum folks in the school district around social studies, it's definitely receives less attention, and I think overall a lot less support for those social studies teachers. So I would love to continue to think about how the Committee of 70 can partner with the district to really make sure that social studies teachers see that as part of their charge and have strong resources and materials to really embed it in the curriculum and have it be something that students are exposed to over and over again. Because I think that, to answer your question, the most important thing beyond like having committed teachers is that it's not just a one-off thing that happens election week, but that students are consistently receiving the message that your voice is important and it's your civic responsibility to be informed, and that you also can then advocate for things that are important to you.
Yeah. As you know, we've had a lot of discussions about the culture, looking at voting as a cultural phenomenon.
Right.
And culture comes from basically a group identity and your participation in that group.
Sure.
So a school, a classroom, a grade is one kind of community.
Right.
The good news is if you can build and sustain that culture that says this is what we do in this school, in this class, that's going to be pretty resilient over time.
Absolutely. And I remember for myself, I was lucky enough to go to high school with a group of students who, in my close group of friends, there were just a lot of kids who were much more engaged in politics than most other people that I knew, and were talking about politics from 16, 17, and it definitely rubbed off on me. At that age, peer pressure is real, and I happened to have really positive peer pressure around staying engaged, knowing what was going on with politics and government, and that just then carried through with me since then.
So let's just talk a little bit about Election Day 2019, and then maybe sort of project into the future. You haven't voted? Have you voted already? Yes,
I have
you have.
voted.
You've got your sticker
today.
So.
I was number 17 in my polling place at 7:30.
Laura and I were talking earlier. Quick shout out to another friend of ours, Jonathan Tannen, who runs a website called 66 Wards, where he does live turnout tracking. And basically, the way this works is you go to the website and you enter your polling place, your ward and division, and the number that you were in going through the line. Jonathan rolls up all those statistics and runs it through the algorithm machine and has an ongoing prediction of what turnout's going to be. So we're not going to reveal any results yet, but encourage you to go to 66wards.com and punch in your numbers.
Absolutely.
Which I have and I expect you have.
Yes, I have as well.
Yeah. So
my husband and I have 2 elections in a row now. We put ours in, and he has commented on the fact that we have consecutive numbers. So the couple that votes together stays together is our motto.
Election nerd that I am, I went to look at his raw results and I found mine. I was like, oh, that's me right there.
Yes.
So.
And he's also going to have, for the first time this election, an election needle like the New York Times as the results start coming in at 8 to predict specific races. So make sure you tune in.
Yep. And partly, I think the value of what Jonathan's doing is amplified by the fact that, the venerable news organizations that used to flood the zone with reporters on Election Day just don't have the troops to do that sort of stuff. So this is a great little tool to help breathe some life into that question. But what's your sense of the mood? This is the eternal question on Election Day. What's going on out there?
It's hard to know.
Is this a change election, or is it more of the same?
It's one of those things where I never know whether the people that I'm talking to are representative of the city as a whole. It seems to me
like you've got a bubble like all of us.
It seems like there's a lot of energy and interest in this election, and with such a big field for races like at large, it seems like there is the potential to really shake things up, maybe. But I am not going to make any predictions on the
Yeah,
air.
it's early yet.
Yeah.
We don't want to influence later returns. If you haven't figured this out, Philadelphia being a heavily Democratic city, the primary election, particularly the Democratic primary, kind of is the election.
Right. Yeah.
So
not even kind of, really.
Yeah. Well,
I
we
mean,
always allow for surprises and upsets. But it's just, and everything we know about what motivates people to vote, it's one person asking another person. So my encouragement, it's still, 10:15 in the morning. If there are folks that you know out there who might be on the bubble, might have some logistical issues voting, now's the time to get in touch with them and basically ask, what's your plan? That's the other
Absolutely.
thing that we know is that if people are encouraged to think through the logistics,
When,
I
where.
have to walk the dog, then pick up the kids, then go shopping, and then I'll vote. They're much more
Absolutely.
likely to do that. So just final thought about the Buckholz Fellowship. You'll be ending your term later this spring, early summer. Just your reflections on its value, its meaning.
Absolutely.
We've been glad to have you at many of our board and committee meetings and so forth. But
It's been a great experience. I'm a little sad that it's coming to an end, and would love to stay on if I could. I
always
think that,
want you to leave wanting more.
Exactly.
If it were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, the days are dragging here.
I've been encouraging a number of people that I know to consider applying, because I think if you have a passion for civic engagement, if you want to get more involved in sort of government civics within the city and have been looking for an opportunity, for me it's just been a great way to not only meet the other Buckholz fellows, but to get to meet all of our board members and see all the amazing things that they're doing. Get to hear from policymakers, really getting to be part of the decision making around Resolution 1 has just been really exciting for me, and makes me go into this election with a lot more information and a lot more excitement.
That's great. Well, we're in one way or other, we're trying to create this sense that the Committee of 70 is kind of a clubhouse for people who are interested in politics and civic engagement and turnout and all the stuff we've been talking about, and whether that's in person here at 123 South Broad Street or the virtual clubhouse, like those of you who are experiencing this right now. That's what we're after. So it's been a delight to have you as a Buckholz Fellow and to have you join us this morning. And thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good. Okay, so once again, May 21st, primary election day. Make a plan to vote. Share that with others. Everybody this is the election in Philadelphia. So go do your thing, and one way or the other, we'll see you at the polls. Thanks for watching.
Thanks.